the Russian collusion story really starts in July of 2015. It was all set up from that day forward. From that day forward, I knew what they were doing. She told me, look, I'm schmoozing. Am I giving you too long an answer? Should I go on?
No,
Or
no, it's
We're
good.
hanging on every word. Are you kidding?
Yeah, it's
she
good
told me,
stuff.
look, I'm over here. I have a mentor. And I'm not a spy. I'm not connected, Patrick, to FSB, but I know FSB and I know all the. She put it this way, Patrick, there are 50 oligarchs who run Russia, but there are 7 who really run Russia. I am on very close personal terms with 4 of 7. So, and she said she was very close with his Senator Alexander Torzhin, vice chairman as well of the central bank. And she told me that there was basically that they were the liberals of Russia, liberals in the sense of they hoped someday Russia would rejoin the Western liberal peaceful tradition, and that they had a gun rights club that had been set up by Mikhail Kalashnikov, which is almost a mythically important name to the Russians. And it was about gun rights, but it was really the simpatico people in Russia. See, I'm a disciple of Milton Friedman, and Milton was a friend. And he did this thing where he gave me his name for 10 years when he died. He appointed me the head of the Friedman Foundation, which was supposed to really expire at his death. But he and I were friends, and he asked me to lead it for 10 years, which to me was like Isaac Newton had asked, Milton Friedman. So because of that, that doesn't mean anything to 99% of the world, but to about 1%, that means something. And Maria was the 1%. Right. So that's the background on Maria. But what's interesting, so whenever you think about the Maria story, think of it in 2 levels. One is the real story of what she was and what she was doing. The other story, and the more important story, is how was our government responding? And our government was not responding at all like they normally would.
So wait a minute. So she was a person who was representing liberal Russians, a liberal Russian kind of westernizing view.
Yes, this was her pitch. And let's set aside the question of, is this a come on? Is this just a line? Right. You know, somebody said to me once, somebody in government said, Patrick, don't you think that if the Russians wanted to send someone at you, they'd send someone a good looking girl who wants to talk about John Locke? Well, that's exactly what Maria is. She wants to talk about John Locke and Milton Friedman and Bitcoin and things like this. And so that was her pitch. Set aside whether she's really a spy, and that was her. I think she is what she thought she was. There's some question in my mind about what was going on behind her, but she was saying, look, I'm here basically to build relationships into the Hillary, Cruz, Rubio, and Trump camps. So whoever wins, Russia has a back channel into that administration, and we can start having real discussion and not whatever's going on now that's getting in the way. That was right. Her pitch. Well, that worried me a little bit. For one thing, I was optimistic because I've taken part in some peace activities. And it could lead. Stranger things have happened that something like that would lead to something. But I was sort of 30% worried. Here's a woman who knows all about the FSB and the oligarchs of Russia. She's told me she's going to be moving in with her boyfriend in D.C., a big shot Republican guy. And she's going to be focusing on schmoozing her way into Hillary, Cruz, Rubio, or Trump. And you get why that's a little dicey from a counter. Yeah. So I was sort of 60% optimistic, but kind of 30% worried that this is what she's doing. And even if she's well-intentioned, you just don't want people, you have to be careful about this kind of stuff.
Right.
So I reported this, and with the understanding that I would eventually, that they should know there was somebody doing this, and there was both opportunity and risk. And that's when I'd say Uncle Sam started acting strange, July of 2015, not 2016, which tells me the whole Russia thing was started to be set up by July of 2015. And shall I continue how they did it?
Yeah.
Well, so I knew everyone she met often before she met them. A few of the meetings were arranged by me at the request of Uncle Sam. Nothing I did was without their approval, including when I went to see her. I said, I'm not going to see her again unless you guys give me a green light, because I don't want anyone to say later, hey, Byrne, what do you? So they gave me green light. I saw her again, immediately it turned into this physical relationship as well. But she's really a good girl. But we had this. she was chosen by Mikhail Kalashnikov to do this. And because I was Milton Friedman's chosen guy, there was a little bit of kismet and we were excited to know each other. But I said, let's just meet every 6 weeks. When you get bored, we'll meet somewhere. And we pick some city to meet, New York, Miami, San Francisco, and I'll show you a good time. You get to see the city. We'll spend a few days. I thought I'll be learning more to pass up the chain of command, maybe so I can open the doors for her she wants open. But I wasn't going to introduce her to anyone unless they told me to. And I could tell you by November, December what they were doing. She had met somebody in Hillary's camp, and then they had given a prophylactic briefing to Hillary to keep her out. And then Maria was happy because she didn't like Hillary at all. She likes the Republic. She's much more of a Ron Paul type. Her politics were Ron Paulish. So she was excited about Cruz, Rubio, or Trump. And to be frank, the United States government was just letting her go at it in a way that they would never normally do. But they were aware of her the entire time. I'll give you an example.
I get it. Okay, I see.
Let me give you a good example with Chris Christie.
Yeah.
Now, Chris Christie reached out, wanted to meet me. People think of me as a New Hampshire businessman. I was living in Utah doing overstock at the time. But he reached out. I reported it. They say, take Maria with you, bring her to meet Christie, just the last few minutes of your meeting. So I brought her with me. I picked her up in a helicopter in New York, took her up this very romantic thing to New Hampshire, met with Christie for an hour. The last 5 minutes, I brought in Maria. It turned out later they used that to get a FISA warrant on Chris Christie. Anyone Maria spent, if she just shook someone's hand, they couldn't get a FISA warrant. But by having her spend 5 minutes with him, that meant they could get a FISA on Christie and then listen to anyone he spoke to and anyone they spoke to, 2 hops. So they were using Maria to smudge up the Republican Party. And I could have.
Well, they were using you to use her.
Right. And I could have told you that in December of 20.
And you're the one that did the right thing by reporting, because you didn't want to get in trouble for Logan Act or any of that, whatever,
No, I don't have any worries about that.
You didn't want to get in trouble. You didn't want to do anything that wasn't okay with the United States government.
That's 30%, and 60% was I was actually initially optimistic that this could lead to something.
Yeah, but you did it right. You went by the book,
right.
And they end up using you.
But there was a last 10% reason. The last 10% reason. Did you? Shall I save that? It's a little bit harder to explain. My last 10% reason was I wanted to see how they would react. I wanted to see what they would do with her. I had become aware at that point suspicious that whoever was pulling my puppet strings was corrupt. And I can't say why.
When did you get suspicious?
2010.
Oh.
2010, and I can't say why. Certain things happened over several years that made me think there was someone in my chain of command who was no good Nick. But I didn't. But then this happened with Maria, and so 10% of me was thinking, well, I use this horrible example in the book, but back when I was a wrestler, I used to.
You were a wrestler?
I was a wrestler, yeah, wrestler, jiu-jitsu, all that stuff. We used to take a piece of plastic, dip it in boiling water, and bite into it and make a mouth guard. Mm-hmm. In maybe the most awful sense, what happened subsequently is my fault, because I took Maria, who seemed to want to be dipped into the national security pot. I said, let her dip in there and let's see what bite marks the deep state makes on her. I'd become suspicious at that point that there was a corrupt deep state, and I thought if I'm right, they're going to use. I just knew that we would get a dental impression of the deep state, and ultimately that was my goal. So we have in the story of Maria Butina, we have the perfect dental impression of the deep state.
Your world is plastic, can see through.